Welcome to Noland Park, Oakland, California, a wild place within the city, a safe haven to native Californian plants and animals. We the people can freely visit here, experience the beauty of Noland, discover wildflowers, endangered Maritime Chaparral, see the birds of prey circling along the ridgeline, and thoroughly immerse ourselves in an authentic piece of native Californian habitat. But like so many places on our precious planet, this park is threatened. Oakland Zoo has permission from the city of Oakland to build into this rare habitat, to build a gondola ride, a native animal exhibit, and more. What is the price of this project, and who will pay? It's a multi-million-dollar project. The taxpayer will pay money, and Oakland and the planet will lose an irreplaceable piece of native Californian habitat. When we lose Noland Park's habitat, we lose Maritime Chaparral, a community of shrubs that grows only within the climatic influence of the ocean. We lose California native grasslands. We lose bristly leptosiphon, a rare native wildflower. We lose magnificent oak trees, and we lose the Alameda Whipsnake, already a threatened species unique to the Bay Area. The best action we can take to preserve all of these species is to protect their habitat and not to destroy it.
Well, as you can see, Noland Park has a large expanse of grassland. And we're in our summer dormancy in July. By this time, the grasses have died back. They're not dead, but they are no longer producing green shoots. And one of the wonderful parts about Noland Park is that it has a large expanse of native grassland. That's a rare plant community in the state. We have fewer than 1% of the original native grasslands that were in California. So it makes it quite special. This time of year, the native grasses are resting. They sink very, very deep roots, the perennial grasses, and so they're able to survive during this very dry period. As you know, in California, it's a Mediterranean climate, so half the year we don't really have rain, and then we have a long rainy season beginning in November. So if we come back here in November when the rains have begun, we'll see a very different kind of grassland. Things will have greened up, and some of the features of the rainy season will appear that we can't see right now.
What is this amazing place we find ourselves in?
This is the Maritime Chaparral, and it's quite a distinct community. As you can see, the shrubs aren't much more than 4, 5, or 6 feet tall. It's been dubbed the Elfin Forest for that reason. And the area where we are right now is dominated primarily by chamise.
We've come further into this elfin forest and found another beautiful plant. What have we found here?
This is manzanita. That's a common name for shrub species. California has 50 plus species of them, and they're a wonderful, strange plant. This is the brittle leaf manzanita, and manzanita means little apple. Here is a fruit. You can see it looks like a tiny little apple.
But how come we don't see so much of this manzanita?
Well, there's heavy competition in the chamise and between the chamise and the manzanita. And right now, the chamise is essentially out competing the manzanita. If there were to be a fire, it's likely that the manzanita would thrive and come back. Both species have an adaptation for fire. They have these burls that are the base of the plants, and even if the top part of the plant is burned, the plant remains viable and can resprout again. This is an indicator species, and what that means is that the presence of this species in this stand, even if there is perhaps less than 1%, it indicates that this is indeed Maritime Chaparral.
It's a sort of island here. I mean, as you can see looking around, it's kind of an island in the sky, and it has all the things the wildlife need. In the Bay Area, there are lots of beautiful parks, but there are very few that come this far to the west and that have this clear influence of the bay and that are so undisturbed. It's just a remarkable landscape. And then the more I've learned about the ecology of the landscape, it's fantastic.
It sounds as though there are so many different plants and animals that make Noland their home.
Oh yeah, well, we see wildlife here all the time. We've seen, of course, coyote, we see deer, we see skunks, all kinds of small wildlife. And we see, of course, the scat of bobcat, mountain lion. There are clearly lots of creatures who live here and share this space so close to homes and houses.
Noland Park is filled with many wonderful creatures. It even seems to provide a habitat for mountain lions and bobcats. Maintaining their habitat is the best thing we can do to protect all wild native animals.
We have the mountain lion, so Puma concolor, and many of us refer to that cat as the puma. It happens to have more names than any other mammal, so it has its place in the Guinness Book of World Records, over 40 names in English alone. Many stories attached to all of those names, as you can imagine. Incredibly elusive species, and it's stealthily moving on the landscape. The range from the Yukon Territory down to the tip of South America, so a lot of its populations are several regions where it's persisted. We also have the bobcat, and the bobcat is familiar to many of us because we're more likely to see the bobcat out when we're hiking in natural spaces. It's a mesopredator. So the bobcat actually works in an interesting fashion with the mountain lion in a particular landscape. The mountain lion will, however, eat the bobcat if it becomes necessary for its own survival, even if not at times. The mountain lion is a wide-ranging species. What this means is we're talking, typically with a female mountain lion anywhere from 25 to 50 square mile radius, with a male anywhere up to 400 square miles for a home range. So if you think about a male mountain lion, its life is largely on the move. This cat is moving on the landscape, it's mating, it's taking down prey, and feeding and moving on. The female is obviously a completely different setup in this life, which is 70 to 73% of the life of a female puma is spent pregnant or raising her young.
The Oakland City Zoo plans to more than double in size. The construction work has already started. The city first gave planning permission to the city-owned zoo in 1998. But over the years, the zoo's expansion plans changed and now include building an aerial gondola ride, a ridgetop visitor center, a restaurant and gift shop over Noland Park's irreplaceable habitat. In 2011, the city of Oakland rubber-stamped these new plans and turned a blind eye to repeating an essential environmental impact review. Oakland residents did not always want a zoo in their city. The history of the zoo, the city, and the Zoological Society tells us that the establishment of Noland Park helped to guarantee the zoo's survival. But now we are able to recognize the ecological importance of the land. We must ask ourselves if we want to lose this precious habitat to have a larger zoo.
My grandfather, Joseph Noland, he was Joseph Russell Noland, J.R. Noland, who was born in 1873 and died in 1966, born in Alameda, died in Piedmont at the age of 92. Now, under his influence, being chairman of the state parks, purchasing, that he was able to have the state purchase 500 acres of Oakland land and preserve it. And that's about the south end of Oakland, where it becomes later a state park. Now, in 1951, which is several years later after the purchase completed, because my grandfather helped raise the funds that were additional that were going in, that the state had to match the state.
Newspaper records show that through the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, the city-owned zoo story was filled with controversy. The zoo was a financial drain on the city. People didn't like the fact that the Zoological Society charged an entrance fee for the public to view city-owned animals. For decades, the Zoological Society kept promising the residents of Oakland free admission to the zoo, but it never happened. The Zoological Society pressured the city to buy land, but the city refused. The zoo was a cash drain on the city, and in the 1940s, the city council decided to get out of the zoo business altogether. But at this point, Joseph Noland, State Park Commissioner, Oakland Tribune owner, and influential politician, stepped in to save the zoo. He put together a deal where the state would provide half the funds to purchase 450 acres of land. The Zoological Society's president at that time was prepared to match the funds needed to purchase the land for the state, in his words, relieving the city and county of financial responsibility. And probably the Zoological Society did match the state funds, because in 1948 the park became a state park and the zoo a state zoo. Mysteriously, 1 year after becoming a state park, the state leased everything back to the city of Oakland, and the city subleased the zoo to the Zoological Society. Inexplicably, in 1975, the whole park was completely handed over to the city by the state. The winner in this story is the Zoological Society, which continues to be contracted to manage the city-owned park and zoo to this day.
The Oakland, the state of California, and the Alameda County, they all named the park Joseph R. Noland State Arboretum and Park. Now, the interesting point here is the word arboretum. Arbor comes from Latin, meaning a lot of trees on land, but arboretum is this scientific study of the land and the growth of trees and animals and ferns and so forth like that, which is very important relating to the preservation of a park.
Did a backroom deal take place between Joseph Noland and the Zoological Society president? It's entirely possible. The Zoological Society was desperate for land, but didn't seem to be able to afford to buy the whole park, and the city refused to buy the land for them. Yet with Noland's help, the state paid half the money, the Zoological Society paid the other half, and the zoo's future was guaranteed.
In 1975, the management of the park was turned over to the city of Oakland. You know, you mow the lawns. You know, the state's not going to come and do that. The Oakland also owns, by the way, you know, I believe, that it owns the zoo, Oakland Zoo, and so Oakland holds two hands, having that thing, the balance of what is right and which is better and which is needs and so forth. But the zoo is growing, not the park. But the zoo is growing, and thus needing more space than that. And that's up to a decision of the city of Oakland that makes it. However, there are some community leaders who live right next to the park, and they are very disturbed of feeling that the park is being chopped away by not the animals, but the zoo. And the city of Oakland is permitting that.
What if the sun never peeps over that horizon we seek, because the buildings block it? What if the sun should never set, because we find a way to genetically alter it? Oh, this I believe is the highest conceit. We should bend and retreat and just love this planet. Now I don't claim to have dealings with higher beings. You know, it's just a gut feeling, because we don't know why we're here. And every theory is just an idea. And this one caused the trail of
Regardless of the machinations or intentions of the businessmen of 60 years ago, Noland Park has become a safe haven for rare native California plants and animals. Preserving natural habitat is one of the best things we can do to protect wild animals such as mountain lions and bobcats. Unfortunately, this unspoilt habitat is about to be lost forever as the zoo fulfills its 1940s dream of consuming more of Noland Park.
I've had the great good fortune of doing whatever I want to do every morning for the last 50 years, which is to work in the environmental field. And a good part of that time was in landscape preservation, acquiring unique landscapes and keeping them from being developed around the country and even the world. The interview today is a subject of special interest to me. The idea of really looking at a piece of land and appreciating its potential for the future and its importance in its natural condition, not in a looking backward developed one. I did an administrative study of the British National Trust and did it by bicycle with my family. My kids were small. And I was absolutely astonished at the ethics and values the citizenry had, that really these preserved lands represent the heritage of England, and they would defend it as volunteers. And no, the worst developer in the world wouldn't think of developing a trust site in England. And here we're always compromising, we're always trying to see some economic reason for bringing about change.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Darren Ranaletti, and I'm the case planner on this project. Tonight in my remarks, I'm going to give you some background and then a brief overview of the proposal, and then talk about what the purpose of tonight's hearing is. The Oakland Zoo is a city-owned facility located in Noland Park and managed by the East Bay Zoological Society. In 1998, the city approved a master plan to upgrade and expand the zoo. Some of the elements of the 1998 master plan have already been completed, such as the new Science and Environmental Education Center and improvements to the Children's Zoo. One component of the 1998 master plan that has not yet been implemented is the proposed California exhibit, which would feature native California species. Less than significant impacts. Continues to have less than significant impact, and there would continue to be a less than significant impact. Next. This is not a special status species under CEQA, so therefore any potential impacts would not be considered significant under CEQA, but if it was considered a special status species, we don't believe any significant impacts would occur, and the conclusion is that would continue to have a less than significant impact. California Interpretive Center and the Veterinary Medical Hospital would be considered recreational buildings because they support the recreational activity of the zoo. Therefore, continue to have a less than significant impact. Those noise measurements confirm less than 5 decibel increase and therefore less than significant impact. Regarding effects on open space, the environmental effects are analyzed throughout the CEQA document and would be less than significant.
And then lastly, just for the public's sake, I got this answered in a previous case we looked at. How is substantial determined? In order to, you determine that substantial changes have not occurred. How is substantial determined?
Well, there's a couple parts of that question, so let me see if I can get to that, and if I don't, let me know. There's the question of if something is significant. Is that a significant impact? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm talking about substantial changes to determine whether or not an EIR is necessary or not.
Okay, so when we talk about substantial changes, we're talking about substantial changes to the project, but that those changes result in significant impacts. So it's not a question of whether there are substantial changes. It's a question of whether those substantial changes result in significant impacts.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if I guess we're done. No more questions. We're ready for the public comment period.
The role of the zoo can be a tremendous one if we handle it correctly. And the dichotomy here is we have a captive animal. The animal's not born to be captive. It's captive potentially for a number of reasons. If we're talking about animals that were bred to be put in a zoo, I just think it's the biggest waste for the animal and for the human. It's not a real situation. If we have an animal that was removed from the wild, the question we have to answer for ourselves is this animal better behind bars for the remainder of its living days, or is it better off not having survived it?
Well, zoos are nothing more than prisons for animals that are maintained for human amusement. And zoos came about during a time when it wasn't really practical, or in some cases even possible, for people to learn about especially exotic or wild animals from other continents, or to go and see them in person. Unfortunately, now we live in a time when you can hop on a plane and you can fly to another continent and go on a photo safari. Or, if that's not your level of commitment, you can watch an amazing documentary about these animals in their natural habitats in the wild. You can read a book. You can go online and take a virtual safari at a sanctuary. So zoos are really a thing whose time has passed in history. And, we have a much more sophisticated knowledge about how animals are like us, what they require to be healthy and happy. And we know that captivity is not a situation that makes animals healthy or happy. It's a situation that makes them miserable and actually generates a whole new set of health concerns for animals. So it's really time that, as a society, we move away from zoos.
all Oakland is doing is taking tired old ideas that nobody else wanted to have rejected, increase the zoo. Oh, my foot. I mean, we're better than that out here. The Bay Area is filled with people who are square pegs. We've all come from someplace else. And most of us, anyway. And we come from someplace else because we were, in my case, I came from the Midwest from Michigan. And all of a sudden it was so polluted and everything, you know, the state tree was a magnificent white pine. I've never seen one. It is clear cut. Thousands of square miles of them, clear cut the whole damn thing. And the state animals of Wolverine. Well, I've never seen one of those either. And much of what the state had been proud of has been eradicated. Bulldozed over, burned, built on, new auto factories, the works.
All I would say is, what do the people at large who should be responsible, not only the city council and the people who are chairpersons of the park and the chairperson of the zoo, where a lot of people who have fundraising every year or twice a year for the zoo to raise money, and they get it, what have you. But maybe they would need something like a city proposition and put it to vote to the cities and say to people, what have you. And I could give a darn good argument for the growth of the zoo. And I think everybody could, because I can't see somebody, what do you need those animals for anyway? You know, well, maybe you've never been there. I don't know. But is the concept of having a zoo in your city, you know, and they do a superb job at the Oakland Zoo. So why not to give them some of the land to use constructively, as long as they don't rape the land?
Zoos have varying levels of, in terms of, if you visited different zoos, you'll see some of the enclosures look more natural than others. Some enclosures are larger than others. But regardless of how well-intentioned a zoo is, they simply cannot provide for the needs of wild animals. For example, if you look at elephants, the leading cause of euthanasia for elephants in captivity is due to arthritis and foot infections and other problems. And these problems come about because these animals are kept in captivity and they're forced into inactivity. If you look at elephants in the wild, their herds will roam up to 30 miles a day. And that's something that a zoo simply cannot provide. And in many cases, we find that elephants are forced to stand on hard surfaces like concrete, oftentimes in their own waste. And so they face shortened life expectancies in the zoos as a result.
How valuable is it for us to see an animal behind bars in a captive situation, when pretty much every time we see that, and I'm going to speak on behalf of, say, a wild felid, a predator species that naturally roams 100 square miles, couple hundred square miles, is it better off for us to see that cat or to not see that actual cat and have a number of media-rich experiences that teach us about that animal, and then we may go out into the wild spaces and see where that animal lives, yet we know we don't really need to view them? And that's just a question. I'm not sure, because my experience in particular at zoos is that I come away quite depressed once I've had an interaction, and there's always an interaction, whether we know it or not, with this animal behind the bars, and they see us. Is there a deadness to the eyes? Has the animal given up? More often than not, yes. I think we need to start to answer these questions about whether that in itself is, that value added is powerful enough to have an animal sitting there for us to go visit that is miserable, it's not living the life it was meant to. Or is it okay? I mean, is it something that's valuable for kids to come in and see, or adults? I don't know.
Well, any claims that zoos make a meaningful contribution toward the education of children or adults about wild animals is at best wishful thinking and fantasy, And at worst, it's willfully misleading the public for an excuse to continue to imprison and profit off the suffering and misery of the animals who are entrapped in these facilities. The evidence that zoos provide an educational experience simply is not there. In fact, there was a comprehensive study done of 5 zoos in the UK in the mid-2000s, and they wanted to learn about the level of knowledge that zoo visitors had about conservation as a result of visiting the facilities. Also, their willingness to take action on that knowledge that they were hoping that they acquired at the exhibits. And what they found is there was just no meaningful correlation between visiting the zoo and an interest or a willingness to take action on conservation issues.
There should be a change on the horizon of the role that zoos play in our communities. We're in a time where it's more important than ever that we understand species in our ecosystem, our connection to them, keeping everything wild is more important than ever. And how can we teach that? Can we teach that without us actually seeing one of these animals? I don't know. We should be able to. I've been fortunate enough to see many of these species, so my work has put me right in front of many of these wild creatures. I tell you, it's a totally different animal than what you're going to see behind bars.
How can you possibly grasp the majesty and the true impressiveness of an elephant when she is standing in a barren enclosure, swaying side to side and bobbing her head, a quarter or 30% of the time that she's in that exhibit because she is frustrated and going out of her mind? What do you learn from a polar bear who paces back and forth repeatedly in the space of just a few feet because he is so distraught? When you're seeing these things, it's giving children especially a bad education about animals. When a child visits a zoo and sees one lone elephant standing in a barren cement enclosure in her own waste, that teaches that child nothing except that it's permissible to make animals suffer for human profit and entertainment. And that child has no way of knowing that in the wild, these are incredible animals who will roam up to 30 miles a day with their herds. Female calves will stay with their mothers for their entire lives, and male calves will stay with their moms into their teens.
I don't think a zoo can compete effectively today with the innovative TV natural footage. I mean, it's silly to think so, and silly to try to compete by building whatever this device is people are supposed to ride up a hill over. Just the word chaparral, what that means. It's a basic plant of Californian and Mediterranean world. And it's the last natural area, it's the last vast system unstudied. You don't need to build another exhibit. We've got chaparral as a basic plant of California, and we don't know much about it. What's wrong with having the chaparral there become the center focus of a new research project for chaparral throughout the state? I mean, you could throw in Greece and the Mediterranean and South Africa and some other places where it exists. But to do something to be proud of, not just to be a cash drain. Zoos are less and less popular, and for good reason. But a zoo that was smart enough to incorporate a unique natural landscape and innovate about it, and raise money about it, and challenge their own staff about it. Gee, guy feeds the elephants and somebody hauls off the animal waste and you sweep the streets, and that's supposed to be educational. That things in the past, zoos, cannot capture nature as well as one good video.
If people are concerned about conservation and species preservation, the most important things to do are the most effective things. We know what the main threats are to species in the wild, and those things are conflict with humans, poaching, and threats to their habitats. So anyone who is truly committed to conservation should work on those issues. And we know that that's not something that zoos do. They play no meaningful role in conservation. PETA actually takes the time to look at the 990s, or the tax forms for zoos. We found zoos that spend more money on face painting than anything that they would categorize as conservation. And even those zoos who are categorizing some of their efforts as conservation, in many cases we find that what they claim as conservation or reference in that way is just providing basic food and veterinary care to keep the exotic animals they have imprisoned in their zoos alive so that they can continue to exhibit them. And all of the millions of dollars that are poured into expensive breeding programs so that zoos can have more baby animals to attract visitors to their displays would be much better spent if we took it and we funneled it where it's most desperately needed in preserving those natural habitats for animals.
This California story is about more than Oakland Zoo's expansion into Noland Park. It's a story about our human relationship with the environment and with the plants and animals. Traditionally, for generations, we humans have consumed the planet's resources as if they were limitless. We've exercised dominion over the plants and animals. Well, now is the time for us to change our ways and see ourselves as interdependent with the environment and with all living organisms. If we continue to degrade and destroy the natural habitat, we will destroy ourselves. Chief Seattle said, "Humankind did not weave the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect."
Who owns the water? Who owns the water?